Hey guys, how's it going? Biden administration tells Supreme Court police can seize guns in homes without a warrant, and this is in the name of supposedly preventing suicide. Now, I've been covering this on the channel for a while, and to me it's totally obvious, but Joe Biden is coming for your guns, and if you don't believe me, he said so himself, and I'm going to leave a link to a video I recorded a couple months ago where you can hear it in his own words. Now, we've seen bills like H.R. 8, H.R. 1446, Senator Feinstein's new assault weapons ban. And these are all things that the current office of the former Vice President, Joe Biden, is calling for. And he's calling on Congress to act now. And if they don't essentially act now, he's saying there will be executive actions, a whole slew of them that they're considering, where they can just circumvent how laws are normally written. And looks like they're also going to use the courts. So we're going to come over here to a story. And this is from the Epoch Times, written by Matthew Vadum. And it says right there in the title, Biden administration tells Supreme Court police can seize guns in homes without a warrant to prevent suicide. I'm going to go through this article, give you my opinion of it. But let's say right off the bat, this is going to violate the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the 14th Amendment. It completely violates what this country was founded on. Our rights that were given to us are endowed by our Creator, and that the government would be instituted amongst men. And the only reason the government would actually be there is to protect our natural rights that were endowed by our Creator, given to us by God. And it appears the former Vice President is hell-bent to circumvent not only our Second Amendment rights, but due process of law, the right to be secure in your papers and effects. Let's take a look at this article, because this could have implications and ramifications that could be huge, that could literally affect all of us someday, or even possibly in the near future. So it starts off by saying that the Supreme Court was hearing government's arguments of the community caretaking exception to the Fourth Amendment's warrant requirements, and that it should now be expanded to allow police to seize guns without a warrant in a person's home. And the case comes as the former Vice President and congressional Democrats press for aggressive new restrictions on Second Amendment gun ownership rights. And they are, including these red flag laws that we've heard about forever. These are terrible too. These completely tear down the whole Constitution and Bill of Rights. This is like what they call take them quick, take the guns first, then due process, which completely flies in the face of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And of course, this is coming in the wake of the highly publicized, and I would note politicized, events that have recently happened in Colorado and in Georgia. And in this particular case, basically the Biden administration of the former Vice President Biden is saying that they want to expand the government's power, and they're telling the Supreme Court police should be allowed to enter homes without a warrant to seize handguns. And if you're wondering what country is this is in America, while we still have it. So this is a case called Caniglia v. Strom. And this was on appeal from the First Circuit Court of Appeals. Oral arguments on March 24th lasted 102 minutes in front of the Supreme Court, exceeding the allotted time of 60 minutes. So this was a long, passionate debate where they were arguing before the United States Supreme Court justices. And it starts off by giving you a little bit of background. The community caretaking doctrine holds that police don't always operate as law enforcement officials investigating wrongdoings, but sometimes as caretakers to prevent harm. In emergency situations, and I would note some of the scariest words you can hear. Remember former President Reagan, I'm with the government and I'm here to help. But they're saying that's part of their job. They're here to help by confiscating and seizing your guns without a warrant, apparently. So, police generally cannot conduct searches of private property without consent or a warrant. Yeah, that's what the Constitution says. Now, there was a case in 1973 where the Supreme Court held that police may conduct warrantless searches related to the community caretaking functions, but only in vehicle accidents, okay? Since the principle has become a chattel for a wide range of responsibilities that police officers must discharge aside from criminal enforcement activities. That's what the First Circuit Court stated. So it started off by a Supreme Court case. Now this is called case law. I think a lot of this is BS. The law of the land. And I am for rule of law, as long as the law of the land is the original documents, the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. But now we have case law where they're reinterpreting, and, we only had the best experiment on self-governance that the world's ever seen. But these courts seem to come in and think they know better. They know better for the country, and they're so much smarter than the Founding Fathers that they make these court case decisions, and it becomes what they call precedent or case law. So in 1973, they said they could take and conduct warrantless searches only within a vehicle. Now, I would note there's a big difference still, even then, between a vehicle and somebody's home. So this case basically had to do with a guy named Edward Canigula. He had no criminal history, no records of violence. He'd been married to his wife for 22 years, and in 2015, they had a disagreement in their home. The argument escalated. He produced an unloaded gun and, quote, said, "Why don't you just shoot me and get me out of my misery?" Okay? He was arguing with his wife, whatever. Unloaded handgun. She then spent the night at the motel, and when she couldn't hear from him, she couldn't get a hold of him, she became concerned. She told the police her husband might be suicidal and asked them to conduct a welfare check. The police called the husband, whom they said, quote, sounded fine. He told the police his "just shoot me" comment happened because he couldn't take it anymore. Okay. The husband went to a local hospital briefly after police assured him they wouldn't take his 2 handguns. After he left, they seized his guns without a warrant, telling the wife his life and others could be in danger if they left the guns in the home. After the officers falsely represented to Mr. Canigula that the petitioner had consented, she led the officers to the gun, Canigula stated in a brief. See where this is heading, guys? The couple and the lawyer asked the police to return the guns, and the requests were refused. The husband sued, but the district and appeals courts allowed the search under the community caretaking exception. Now, let's go back. The caretaking exception in 1973 basically said it was just within a vehicle. Well, now we're in somebody's home, okay? And the husband argued in his Supreme Court brief that the exception shouldn't be applied inside the home, the most protected of all private spaces. And I would most definitely agree. What do you guys think? Duh. We shouldn't even be having this argument. The Bill of Rights is pretty clear, which I'll quote from in 1 second. Here's where the former vice president's administration is coming into play. During the oral arguments, the Department of Justice lawyer, Morgan Ratner, supported the city's position, arguing that this case was fundamentally different from most of the court's other Fourth Amendment cases because the question is not act now or get a warrant first, it's act now or not at all. So they're trying to say, hey, we just need to take the guns first, and then we can figure out due process later. Now he never even got his guns back, even after they sorted it all out. And then it says right here, they're going through, here's some more of the arguments from the administration, from the Department of Justice. Although there have been a lot of questions this morning about whether this emergency aid or exigent circumstances or community caretaking or something else, the label you give it is not nearly as important as the principle. And the key principle is if someone is at risk of serious harm and it is reasonable for officials to intervene now, that is enough. So he's basically saying, who cares about due process? Who cares about any of this? Just take the guns first, then due process. And you can see how this worked out in his instance. Now they're going through here. Now the attorneys for the Canigula, he said, warrantless home entries are unreasonable in the absence of exigent circumstances. Shea Davrotsky told the court. The Fourth Amendment protects the home in a special way. A reasonable search requires a warrant unless there is consent or a true emergency. Yeah, and they were giving consent. The wife gave consent under lies and false pretext. Now they're basically trying to take this caretaker exception where cops become caretakers. Now this is interesting. A cop's a caretaker for a couple minutes, but then they immediately became law enforcement, right? All within minutes when they decided to confiscate the guns. Now, a regular caretaker, a home nurse that many of you are probably familiar with, they can't just take your guns. So how can they argue in one side of their mouth that these are just caretakers? Okay, assuming that's true, how can they immediately take somebody's firearms? To me, that's not them being caretakers anymore. They're being law enforcement. And this just feels like, to me, a whole shapeshifter thing where they're trying to take something that sounds good on its face. Like, hey, don't you care about people's health and well-being? Well, of course we care about people. We care, but then they immediately shifted into now they're seizing guns? This completely and utterly is in the face of, obviously, the Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, 14th Amendment. Now, Justice Clarence Thomas asked if police officer enters a home and finds someone unconscious on the floor, if that person could sue the police. Justice Brett Kavanaugh brought up and said the developing legal test to cover various situations was great, but said in the real world, police have to make split-second decisions. Okay? And then they go on to say every day, on average, there are 65 suicides by gunshot, and police can't help prevent that. That's what the Biden administration argued. So basically, it goes on and on. I'll leave a link to this article down in the description. But Justice Alito brought up something I thought that was interesting. Justice Samuel Alito told DeSisto that people are concerned that the caretaking exception doesn't seem to have any clear boundaries, quote. And I'll continue the quote. And when you tell us that it can include getting a cat down from a tree, that fortifies that concern. I would agree with that. So in 1 minute, they're looking for the mental and physical well-being of a citizen, but then taking their guns. They're helping a cat down from a tree and then going to seizing guns. Are they a caretaker or are they law enforcement? I don't understand the government's argument that it would be both, right? I'm going to take a look here at the Fourth Amendment because this is very relevant to this case. The Fourth Amendment says, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. They did not have a warrant when they took these guns, and the Biden administration's arguing they should never need one in these instances where they feel that someone could be possibly suicidal, but who actually determines that? And there's a huge rabbit hole here. One that, like, could have very far-reaching implications that could affect all of us eventually. Now, let's take a look at the fact that they took his property from them, okay? Let's go to the Fifth Amendment. And near the end, it says, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Now, if police just came in and took his guns, to me, that's them depriving somebody of property without any due process. You know, a police officer at your home using their discretion, that is not what due process is defined in our founding documents. Very scary. Let's take a look at the 14th Amendment. And there's 4 sections to it, but it basically repeats the same thing near the end. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the law. Now, to me, that violates both. Obviously, the depriving them of their property with no due process, okay? Also, equal protection. So in some cases, the police officer at their discretion can take, but in other times they wouldn't, and this could have to do with an anonymous complaint, a spouse that you're in an argument with. I mean, there's all these things, and they're trying to open it wide open and say this doesn't apply to vehicles anymore. It applies to someone's home, which is the place that most people, including me, believe has the highest level of expected privacy, and that you would have to put the most strict scrutiny on any test, you know, in any court case, with the 4th Amendment, 5th Amendment, 14th Amendment, and last, but certainly not least, the 2nd Amendment, because they're taking guns. And the 2nd Amendment is also pretty darn blunt, pretty clear, and I don't understand how any court could interpret it other than what it says. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And while violating his 4th Amendment right, and his 5th Amendment right, and his 14th Amendment right, by taking the guns is obviously an infringement on the right to keep and bear when the police took them and wouldn't give them back. So, try to get through this as fast as I could, guys. It ended up going a little longer than I wanted it to, but we can talk more about this in my live stream. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. But we're looking at gun control, impending gun control that's going to be voted on in the Senate very soon. They've already had committee hearings on it. And if the filibuster holds up, they might be able to fend it off. If they're able to get rid of the filibuster outright or make major what they call reforms to it, it'll probably pass, to be honest with you. Now, if that doesn't work, they're looking at executive actions. And if that still doesn't work, they're looking at using the Supreme Court. based on previous case law. And if this case were to go against the gun owner, the Canigulas, then this would also establish new case law. And it would basically be where, look, it starts off saying if there's a car accident in 1973, which I don't agree with that decision either. And then it shifts into this current case. And as justices were mentioning in the arguments, it could be a cat in a tree. It could be them doing a welfare check. These police apparently can shapeshift at any given second and put on different hats at their own discretion, where right now I'm a caretaker. And I'm here just for the care and health of the community, which is a feel-good statement, and it does sound good, until they immediately shift to seizing guns, which is definitely a law enforcement type action. These are just my opinions, guys, but I see a lot of problems with this, and I didn't want this to go under the radar and not be talked about, so I'm talking about it here. I appreciate all of you guys watching my videos. If you liked the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to help the channel, the links to support are down in the description. Thanks a lot, everyone. Stay strong. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, and we're just talking about reality here, and important cases like this could have far-reaching effects. We need to stay vigilant and keep on fighting off this tyranny at every turn, because it seems they're never going to stop. So, unfortunately, we can't stop either. Alright, thanks for watching, and have a good one.